So, Brad, I got a fun story for you about Ronald Reagan, of all things. Are you ready for this one, my friend?
Well, I'm always here for a Ronald Reagan story.
Nancy and I. All right. So I don't know what year it was. My dad had recorded, I think it was an NFL game on a VCR. If people remember VCRs before, my God, we're going back a couple of days here. Anyway, they had cut away from the game for some sort of comments from Ronald Reagan when he was president. And he's standing at a podium at the National Butchers Association meeting, right? It's like in Canton, Ohio, the National Butchers Association meeting.
And they're probably having a nice, good old-fashioned meet and greet.
Yeah, exactly. And he's doing a song and dance about cutting taxes and, small businesses like you that could use a little helping hand from Uncle Sam. Yeah. And he goes, how many people in the audience, just out of curiosity, feel like their small business is paying too many taxes? And all the butchers, the hands go up, Brad. And this has become lore in the Kellett house now because, I'm not kidding, half of the hands were missing fingers.
These hands go up, half of them are bandaged, half of them have 3 fingers, 2 fingers.
It looked like the apocalypse, like they've all been fighting with machetes against each other. So we only because it was on VCR did we watch it. We're like, we didn't see that. Surely that was not what we just saw. And we would rewind. Yeah. We would rewind, and then the whole family would laugh again. And imagine, you're a president of the United States, you go to a butcher's conference, and you're glad-handing, Brad. You're glad-handing.
Good luck finding a glad hand. Well, I have to tell you, I've been around shaking hands for the last hour, and I think I felt a cumulative total of 5 fingers. I got to get the hell out of here. Oh, my God.
So on that note, I want to say hello, everybody, and welcome to Comic Lab, the show about making comics.
And making a living from comics. I'm Brad Geiger, the editor of webcomics.com and the creator of Evil Inc.
And I'm his pal, Dave Kellett. I'm still laughing about that. Cartoonist of Drive and Sheldon and co-director of Stripped.
Oh, you couldn't have written that scene any better. It's just so beautiful. And this week's Hour of Comics Advice is made possible by your support at patreon.com/comiclab. So Dave, let's talk comics.
Let's talk comics, my friend. And just a reminder that this show is going out live to all of our friends and pals over at patreon.com/comiclab at the live gab level. And just by a show of hands in the live stream, it looks like everyone's doing good.
Oh my God. Wouldn't that have been funny? Well, how many of you think you're paying a little too much on your taxes? I see 1, 2, 2.5, 2 3/4. 3 3/8.
We're gonna get there, Nancy. Oh, Oh my God, Brad! Imagine that butcher trying to add up your bill at the end of it. He's counting on his fingers. All right, let's see. That's gonna be $1, $2, $3.50, $4, $4.25. He's like the pinky comes in real handy for doing change. Oh God.
Oh my gosh.
Oh my God. Great. Anyway, so we got a fun show for everybody today. But first, I want to give a shout out and a huge thank you to our friends over at Wacom at wacom.com who are going the extra mile to bring you the Wacom One, which is a fantastic digital device that both Brad and I have in our studios and we use. And no fingers are involved. There's no loss of fingers with the Wacom One. I got to tell you that. We have picked the right industry, Brad, in case a president ever comes to the National Cartoonist Society meeting. We're all going to proudly hold up our Wacom Ones. No butchers in sight.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, I got to tell you, I've been using that Wacom One more and more, especially over the winter holiday when I've been spending a little bit more time at home. Just like just the other day, it was just like, it's just too cold to go out there and go to the studio. I'm going to stay and work from home for a little while, and having that Wacom One allows me to do that. And I don't give up anything when it comes to professionalism or quality because I'm doing the same quality work that I'm doing on that Cintiq 24 over there. It's just a wonderful little piece of equipment there, the Wacom One.
Amen. So we give a huge shout out and a thank you to our friends Wacom at WACOM.com. And Bradley J. Geiger, we got a fun first topic for today that you have titled the bad tweets game. I said the Brad tweets game. Oh boy, I'm still on Ronald Reagan. Sorry. Keep going.
So this is something that I came up with recently, and I was doing it on my live TikTok shows for a little while.
Because I wanted to make trap?
As a third, well, yes. First I would put on that nice mesh shirt that you had brought me.
Yes.
And
did you get the nipple to nipple chain that I had sent?
Yes. It's a little heavy, but I'm working through it.
Sure.
I'm working through it. But I would do this on TikTok where I'd say, but not, and again, never as a way to make anybody feel bad. I'd never point anybody out or tell anybody's names. We're just talking about approaches, not about people. And I want to really make this clear, because what I said, what I do, because I do webcomics.com, because I do this show with you, I always, in my tweet deck, I always have one of those searches at hashtag webcomics, just so I can see, because I'm intensely interested in it, what people are posting, what they're doing, how they're posting, what their approach is, stuff like that. And that's going to be one of my points coming up. No normal person does this, but I do, because I'm always kind of monitoring it to see what's going on. And what happens, what I actually do see is a number of approaches that happen over and over and over again. They get almost zero, if not exactly zero engagement. In other words, these are not good strategies. These are bad approaches. But you'll see the same people doing them over and over and over and over again. What I said to TikTok not so long ago is, you could go through here any day at a random day, a random hour. You could bring up hashtag webcomics and just go through it and see all of these approaches that are low effectiveness approaches that are done time and time again. And the reason you do it isn't to say, oh, that person's dumb. The reason is, once you start to identify bad approaches, it clears that off of your slate so that you can start to concentrate on things that work better. Once you see some of these things, they're just not good, you can free yourself up. So here's a few things to look at if you, like me, play the bad tweets game. And the number one thing is, you're starting off with you're starting off a little bit shooting ducks in a barrel, because I will argue that if you're using hashtag webcomics right off the bat, you're making a mistake. It's a huge mistake. And if you look at Twitter's own language, go ahead, Dave.
No, I was going to stop you for a second, because I have to ask you, I, having been on Twitter for I don't know how many years, are hashtags a thing at all on Twitter?
No, they're actually not.
Because I was under the impression that the only time I see hashtags, I'm assuming someone's using one of those programs that sort of algorithmically feeds the same thing onto Instagram, onto Facebook, onto Twitter, and they have to have the tweets, the hashtags, because Instagram and Facebook could use them. Is there anything on Facebook? I mean, obviously you can search for a hashtag, but it's not hugely popular as a community device, right?
What you're saying gets to the heart of why this is a bad approach, and that is, you're not understanding the written and unwritten community guidelines for each social media platform. On Instagram, you have to have hashtags. Hashtags are used as a search function to a great degree, and as a sharing function. Facebook, I've never been able to find anything codified, but most of the conventional wisdom for Facebook says that they punish hashtags. Twitter, and this is interesting, I've done a little research. Twitter actually has some guidance on their site for using hashtags. And what they say is, listen to this. They've got like a do's and don'ts. Here are 3 don'ts that really sum it up. And this comes right from Twitter. Here's how you use hashtags on Twitter. Number 1, don't over hashtag. 1 or 2 relevant hashtags per tweet is the sweet spot. Okay. Number 2, don't expect, and listen to this, don't expect people to use your hashtags without a reason. The best hashtags have the ability to draw people in and invoke curiosity to explore or join in the conversation. Ask yourself why a person on Twitter would use your hashtag. Remember, share thoughts from earlier?
Right.
If you can't think of a reason, it most likely won't catch on.
They can't think of a reason.
Don't neglect to educate what it is and how to use it. Now,
so Twitter's saying whatever you've got in terms of quantity of hashtags, you want to be like a butcher waving at President Reagan and cut those in half, right?
Yes.
You want to cut those down.
You want to go from 5 to 2. Real quick. But read in between the lines now. What they're saying is we don't use hashtags on our platform as a search function. In other words, and by the way, you also know this from common sense. Nobody except for me who's doing it for ulterior motives, no garden variety webcomics reader is monitoring hashtag webcomics to find new things to read.
Well, I will pause you. If there's something that is, I always get this word wrong. If there's something that is seriously niche enough or niche enough, is it niche or niche?
I think actually I looked at, speaking of things I looked up, I think both are acceptable.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
If something is a niche enough topic, people will search for 68 Dodge Hemi hashtag, whatever it is. And because they just want to see the 68 Dodge Hemi, they don't care about anything else. But I don't that webcomics is so vast and all inclusive that becomes useless. It's like typing in the word cartooning, it's like, okay, well, great. Now you've found every image that was ever created that has the word cartooning in it,
And it's also when people use hashtag webcomics, the assumption there is that people who want to read webcomics will find it through that hashtag. And again, just through common sense, that isn't happening and that's not working because it's such a broad term. So you'll see people use it all the time. It's just even Twitter themselves says, hey, this is something that you want to use. Like if you are doing something about a 68 Ford Hemi, now that's maybe a good hashtag because then enthusiasts might use that hashtag to share your stuff outwardly. Right. But using hashtag comics, hashtag webcomics, and by the way, if you don't believe me, prove it yourself. Use that hashtag, watch your engagement. It's going to be non-existent. Right? Unless other factors are coming in. And that leads me to number 2. And here's something, if you play the bad tweets game, you'll see all the time. Hashtags, and more hashtags, right? And here's a double hit for you. You'll have somebody on a tweet use a whole bank of hashtags, 4, 5, 6, 10 hashtags. And then the coup de grace, they'll throw the URL in there. Now you've got all these hashtags. They're blue type.
Not even including the image. You're saying just the link out.
Yeah. And they'll put the URL in there. Well, what
you've given me as a reader is a lot of work there. So first you got to look at all these hashtags and now click out of this link. That kind of thing.
Try to find the link. It's impossible because it's all blue type. The hashtags are blue. The link is blue. And you've already told me through visual redundancy that these are all hashtags. I'm not going to see the URL in there because A, I'm not going to look for it. And B, if I do, it's going to be searching for a needle in a haystack. Right. So again, Twitter even says 1 or 2 is fine if you're going to do it. It's not a search function. It's a share function. And never use a whole bank of hashtags. It's not good.
Now, before you go too far, because I can hear people out there saying, well, Brad and Dave, you always say you want to drive people to your website or you want to drive people to sign up or you want to drive people to your Patreon. Yes, you absolutely do. But first, you kind of have to earn it. And if your first impulse is before people even really like or enjoy or engage with your comics on Twitter, that you're going to force them to go to your website. That's like asking a first date to go to a third location when you're like, no, let's get to know each other first, that kind of thing. And so you first have to entertain them on the platform that they're on, whether that's Instagram, whether that's Twitter, whether that's Facebook. Brad, sorry to interrupt you. I just want to
in that regard, Dave, I would put like an Evil Ink hashtag on a comic update so that feasibly, and this would be, by the way, you can read the whole comic in the tweet. You're not clicking a link to go someplace else. I could use that Evil Ink hashtag so that feasibly, if somebody wanted to click that hashtag, then they would have a whole list of returns, most of which would be my comic, and they could read the comic that way.
Right.
I don't think anybody's actually doing that,
Right.
but I could put that there if I was so inclined. It would be a better use of the hashtag than hashtag webcomic or hashtag a bank of webcomics, right? It would be a step in the right direction. Again, prove it to yourself. When you see yourself doing this, check the engagement. And by the way, what happens time and time again, you'll see, especially because I've checked some people who do some of these over and over and over again. And I went and looked at their feeds, and every now and again they complain. And you know what they blame? They blame the algorithm. I don't see what's so great about Twitter. The algorithm no, it isn't the algorithm. You're not doing good practice and you're getting bad results. You can't blame the algorithm for that. We can blame the algorithm for a lot. Believe me, I'm no algorithm apologist, but you can't blame the algorithm for everything. Sometimes you keep banging your head against the wall and getting the same results. You got to change at some point, right?
I like the idea of an algorithm apologist, as though you're like Thomas Aquinas writing in the 14th century. Like, no, I'm an algorithm apologist.
Please, we don't understand the algorithm. We need to love the algorithm.
We need to love the algorithm's doing its best. Okay, so what strategies have you seen? If I can jump you ahead, what strategies have you seen that do work in the bad tweets game?
Here's one. And in fact, this goes right into something we were talking about. And that is sometimes you'll see somebody posting like the name of their comic, the URL, and then, a bank of hashtags. And of course, what we tell people all the time is if no one's going to click that link, you've got to be able to read the comic on Twitter. You've got to post that comic there. Otherwise, nobody's going to read it. I give certain folks a dispensation. If you're still running ads on your website, and if you're still making good money from ads, if that's you, that's a big if, then I can see that you want to take people to your website. But like every now and again, you'll see people just post like a chapter image, like just a picture of the character. And then there'll be words that say new chapter or new page. And the person will say, there's a new page, and they'll have art there, but it's not the comic. And again, they still expect you to click that link and go over.
Wait, what do you mean it's not the comic? Can you explain that better? What do you mean?
I'm trying to think of the best way to explain this, but it's an image, but it'll be like the character's face and promotional words that'll say new page of new shoes for Tuesday over on blankety blank URL. And then you've got to click the link, but it's almost like a chapter heading or a chapter image.
Or some kind of splash page image, but it's a push in on that. Yeah. Okay.
You'll have a splash or something. But again, a lot of times it's a complete non sequitur image. It makes sense on the page, but when you're looking at it at Twitter and you're like, what's going on here? This is meaningless.
Right. Although to be fair, if someone because there are those cartoonists that do this, and I don't do it myself, you don't do this.
Yeah.
But the cartoonists that do post an entire chapter or an entire act at a time, like, hey, the next 30 pages are up. How does one share that in a way that's enticing and gets people to click in, do you think?
You've got to choose an image or a panel that is super, super compelling. And on that, you've got to really choose your image. It can't be just a picture of the guy's face or the woman's face with, new page. It's got to be a compelling image. It's got to be an image that makes you want to click that link.
Well, I don't disagree with you. I was going to suggest that if you are that type of cartoonist, and I'm not, that posts a full chapter or a full, section, a chunk of your things on once a month or something. I was going to suggest that maybe you post the full entire page and then say, 29 more pages are ready to read, but maybe at the bottom of the image or something. That's a trickier one. But I like your idea too about a compelling single image. But so to me, one of the advantages of Twitter when I'm on it is that the best case use for Twitter, I think, is that you get a cohesive, individualized but completed thought within a tweet, right? And that's the ones that go viral. It's like, it's 2 sentences that tell you everything you need to know about, I don't know, taxes or parenting or whatever it is, right? It's a funny, cohesive, interesting, thoughtful idea, right?
Yeah.
And so comics kind of have to follow the same rule. It has to be a full, complete, cohesive, insightful, funny comic that you are sharing there on Twitter, not somewhere else. And then over time, as you gain more and more people going, I've seen this style, I know this style, I like this style, the hope is to drive people to the website. But it's a really hard ask on that first time. And really, it only happens when you go so viral with it that out of 1 million people, you get 1,000 that come to the site, right? Because only just the law of statistics on that. But on the average tweet, you're not going to drive a bunch of people on that specific newfound comic to them, to your site. The goal is to set the groundwork for future fandom engagement.
Yeah, absolutely. I've got a couple more that I want to talk about, and then I do want to come back around and talk about some more best practices. But there's just a couple. One that I really want to talk to that are I think important to discuss. Number one.
Brad was using Reagan butcher fingers there to count. I've got 1, 2, 2.5. I've got 2.5.
Two and a knuckle. So here's one, and I changed the words on this.
Okay.
But listen to this tweet. Do you guys know I have a webcomic that I pour my heart into? It has 10 chapters, and the 11th is coming out next week. If you read it, it would mean the world to me. And then they've got hashtag, and the URL. Okay.
I know this. It's old Irish guilt. Yes, I'm familiar. Come enjoy my comic because I'm going to guilt the hell out of you.
It would mean the world to me. You're starting on again, and this.
But here's also how this sounds to me, Brad. You read it in a positive tone. It also could sound like this.
Yeah.
Do you guys know I do a webcomic? It would mean the world to me if you stop what you're doing and come read my comic because I've poured my heart into it. That's also a potential read of that.
Yes.
Is that the language is not enticing per se. It is a guilt-based language if you look at the words.
And you got to remember, like we talked about an episode or two back, when you're writing this thing to be read, you have to realize that it's going to be read in automatically a more dour tone than you probably expected to put it in. You know, you got to play for the curve there a little bit. And know that it's going to be read like an octave lower, if you will, an octave lower.
Yeah.
But we talk about this on Patreon all the time when we're talking about crowdfunding, and that is you never talk about what's in it for me. You talk about what's in it for the reader.
Yes, and you nailed it, because that's what comes across in that tweet that you just read. It's like, guys, I'm having a real day here, and it would just mean the world to me if you read my comic that I poured my heart. It's like, all right, we get it. We're all walking a hard road. But the point of being an entertainer is, what do you offer the reader, not what do they bring you as the creator.
Right. And that dovetails with another really bad engagement strategy, telling them that it's free. After 20 years of internet, we know that it's free. If it would be more of a surprise if you were saying I'm launching something and you got to pay to read it for the first time. We know that it's free. And my answer to both of these people is, don't tell me what's in it for you. Don't tell me that it's free. Tell me what's in it for me as a reader. Tell me why it's good. And this is going to come into best practices at the end of this little rant, but don't tell me, it's not about what's in it for the artist. It's about what's in it for the reader. That's what you need to put out there.
Right.
And here's the last one that I'm just going to talk about for a second. And that is, and this is just for me, especially for a tweet where the characters are counted, right? You've only got so much space. Here's one I see every now and again. It makes me cringe. New comic every Monday. Listen, pal, nobody fucking cares. Nobody cares that there's a new comic every Monday. I'm telling you, nobody's running to their calendar and jotting this down. Hey, Frank's got a new comic every Monday. Nobody's doing that. Remember, webcomics readers, internet readers, used to be foragers. Back in the early 2000s, they were foragers. They were going out trying to find stuff. And when they found
to websites,
Yes. And when they found it, it was, oh my God, thank God I found something worth reading here. I'm going to bookmark it. I'm going to hit the IRSS. I'm going to do this. Maybe I am going to write it down on my calendar. Today, that person is sitting in front of a smorgasbord with a conveyor belt. And there is all kinds of every imaginable type of food and drink swinging past them. If you tell them there's a slice of peach pie every Monday at 5 o'clock, they don't care because they got a slice of chocolate pie right in front of them now. And they got apple pie coming down the line, and they've got blueberry pie. And that's not even talking about the cakes and the steaks and the chops and the milkshake. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yes. It's an unending Lucille Ball in front of the chocolates is what it is. And so you telling them that there's a chocolate coming 3 weeks from now, they're like, yeah, okay, fine. I've got a billion chocolates right in front of me. I got to eat,
It's meaningless. And it takes up time and space that you could be using telling us why it's good. So let's talk about a couple things that you can use now that we've identified a bunch of stuff that you really don't want to do. And again, prove it yourself. You're doing it right now. You're getting bad engagement. I guarantee you are. Here's a couple things. Remember, and I always point people to this one. We did that show with Kevin McShane where he talked about share thoughts, and it's probably the best culmination of advice. You've got to give your social media reader a reason to share it. What's the share thought? Go back, listen to that episode. It's got everything you need to know. If you don't want to do that, remember my advice. If you're ever stuck on how to talk about your comic, talk about your pride and your joy. Talk about why you're proud of it, or talk about why doing this comic or doing this specific page or panel, why it brought you joy. Those are
I'm smiling.
Always
I'm
good.
smiling because you mentioned this, I don't know, every 6 months or so. And for I always super remember it the first month I use it. 2 months in, I still using it. I always start to forget it. And then every 6 months you remind me of that. I'm like, oh, right, pride and joy. Pride and joy. Oh, God, yeah. And here's the thing, because as Brad's saying all these comments, don't think that you're the only one going, oh, Brad's talking to me. I'm sitting here thinking, oh, Brad's talking to me, because we all need to remind ourselves from time to time. Even after 20 years of being online, I still need reminders that, oh, no, I've got to up my game a little bit on social media and change the way I talk. So that's why this helpful chat from Brad is good for all of us, not just the worst actors. Yeah.
And quite frankly, sometimes we just get lazy.
Yes.
Sometimes it's like, oh, just fuck it.
Or you're in a pinch and I just want to get the comic up. I got to go do the other thing that I got to go do,
Yeah. So here's another one I want you to think about, especially in terms of best practices. Especially if you're doing a comic strip, 3 panels or 4 panels. All right. The worst thing you can do, especially with a 4-panel strip, worst thing you can do is to put that comic up as a horizontal image of 4 consecutive panels. 1 image, 4 panels, horizontal. Why? Because 90% of the people reading this are reading on their phones. And if you post a skinny horizontal, it's illegible. It's unable to be read. Chop that up into a square, 2 panels on top, 2 panels on the bottom. Boom, it's readable. Not only readable, it's way more readable by a significant sum.
And I will say this as someone who resisted it for probably 2 or 3 years longer than I should have. Because I was like, no, a comic strip has to be horizontal. That's the way that a comic strip is. Well, it's the way that it was because they needed a consistent display for newspapers, and people read left to right traditionally. So that's how comic strips are set up. But here's the thing, too, is that this is our advice now, is that it's got to be read, north to south. But 15 years from now, when iPhone releases the iPhone 22 with the holographic projector, you're going to hear Brad and I going, you've got to post your comics in a circle. That's the way that the holograph projects. And so what I'm saying is you just got to be ready to roll with whatever technology and whatever displays come along. And right now, the display, at least for the next 5 years or so, is a scroll system. And we just have to acknowledge that that's the way comics should be read on a phone right now.
And it didn't sneak up on us. This was on the horizon for 10, 15 years. We've been seeing this come down the road.
And I say this as someone who was real hesitant and who, frankly, still would like to do horizontals from time to time. I still would, but I've switched over, and it's fine. It actually creates new ways of doing comics, like that one I did a couple weeks ago, Brad, with someone jumping off a cliff. You can figure out new fun ways to do comics that employ that vertical format. So keep going, Brad. I jumped in on you.
Last thought I want to put in your head is that you can put a link in whenever it's necessary, like a link to your website and so forth, or a Patreon link. But remember, if your link is in your bio, and it really should be, your website and or your Patreon, in best case, both should be in your profile. And if it's there, you don't need it on every tweet. If you're posting really good stuff, and you're doing a good job on social media, if somebody's interested, they know where to find it. They're going to click on your profile, and then they're going to find the link to your website or the link to your Patreon. They're going to find it. It doesn't need to be on every tweet. In fact, my own personal opinion is having some tweets without that actually, I think, gives it a little bump, because I think readers are so used to, in the same way that back in the day, we used to have something we call banner blindness on websites. You remember banner blindness?
Yeah.
It meant that anything you put at the very top of your website, it was completely lost. It was a good place to put a murder confession, because people had trained themselves to skip that area of the website.
It was a good place to put a murder confession. Keep going. Sorry, that just caught me. That was very specific. All right, keep going.
Well, ask me what I've been up to.
Well, listen, Robbie had it coming. All right, you go ahead.
Yeah, but they learned to skip that area of a website and start underneath. In the same way, I think social media people have trained themselves. When they see that blue URL, chances are it's a come on, it's an advertisement, it's a promotion
sale of some type. Yep.
And they just kind of immediately kind of give it short shrift. So I've been experimenting lately with doing a lot less linking in my tweets, even for a Patreon post or a Patreon outreach, because it's like, hey, at this point, they know where to go to find my links. It's all in my bio. But Instagram has trained us for that. Every third post, you see somebody saying link in bio, because that's the only place they can put a link. The only good thing out of that is that at this point, everybody knows where to find your link. It doesn't have to be on every tweet. Those are a few thoughts, Dave, that I have when I'm scrolling #webcomics about some things that are low engagement and some ways that I think you could probably up your game.
Well, personally, I thank you, because as much as I've been doing this for, what is it now, 24 years online, to this day, I still make a fair number of the mistakes that you just went through. And so this is something, it's not a judgmental thing for anybody in particular.
No.
Brad's not pointing the finger at you specifically. We all have done aspects of these mistakes from time to time, and it's worth just refreshing from time to time on how to best engage people where they live on social media. And Brad, I super thank you for these points. Hey, if you're listening while you work, take a minute to stand and stretch.
And while you're doing that, we're going to tell you why you should join us on Patreon.
When you do, you're going to get hours and hours of podcasts that we've recorded just for backers.
And exclusive Patreon posts that go even deeper on Comic Lab topics.
And access to our exclusive Discord server, which is a thriving community of professional cartoonists.
So you can support the show you love and get tons of actionable resources for your own cartooning.
And listen, if you can't swing a pledge this month, we get it. No worries.
Yeah, listen, you can still support the show by rating us wherever you get your podcasts.
Just leave a 5-star review and a few kind words.
That, along with mentions on social media, is incredibly helpful.
Now, everybody, let's talk comics. So, Brad, 2 quick updates for everybody. We always like to do updates mid-show. I've got 2 updates. Remember how last show I was saying how, oh, man, shipping out this Kickstarter, it's kind of fun because I can put on a different hat. I can pretend to be a small business owner that does a lot of, just a ton of online shipping. Well, Brad, this week, I hate my small business of being an online shipper. I'm so done with shipping out thousands of packages. I want to go back to being a cartoonist now. I'm so ready to be done with it.
Well, give me a percentage. How, like, are you 50% of the way through, 60%? How far are you? Is there an end in sight?
That's a very fair question. We're probably time-wise, we're probably 70% of the way through.
Yeah.
But it's the long march at this point. It's getting tiring to do the final couple hundred packages. I just want to be done with it. You know what it is too? This is going to make me sound like such an old complainer, but like cardboard dries out your hands.
Yes, it does. Yes, it does.
You get the driest hands when you're just handling cardboard for hours and hours and hours and hours and hours. Anyway, that's my update. Is just a complaint. Just a straight up complaint is my first update.
Yeah, so, it ain't easy.
My second update, people are going to enjoy, because do you remember when Brad composed a whole song that had one of my favorite Brad accents ever, where he goes, "Out among the stars, do you want to be in sci-fi?"
That was when that woman came to you and said, you should do a sci-fi convention. And you were like, well, yeah, it's not a good fit for me. It's not something. And she was insisting she was going to turn your whole career around. And then she came barging into my studio.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. She came barging into Brad's studio.
And there was a knock on the door and she came in and started singing, "Do you want to be in sci-fi? Do you want to be a star?" and it was probably one of my happiest moments from the show. So we've got an update on that situation.
So the woman, remember that at San Diego Comic-Con, she came back to my booth. I think it was 3 times. Like, she was really belaboring the point that I was handling my career wrong. I had to go to a science fiction convention, and why wasn't I listening to her and all this sort of stuff. Anyway, a couple weeks back, I got invited, Brad, as a guest of honor to a science fiction convention, and I'm going. I'm going to go this fall to my first ever science fiction convention. I'm ready for it, Brad. I'm ready to go. And if you're asking, is Dave only going because he's a guest of honor? Yes, that's exactly why I'm going.
Oh my God! Now, do you think this lady is going to see you at this show? She's going to be redeemed. She's going to be redeemed finally. Hold on, Dave. Hold on. I think somebody's coming in. Oh my God! I think she's here. So you finally working sci-fi. You're finally drawing stars. You were failing badly at your booth. You're so uncouth. You ought to be on Mars. You finally wrote an application. You signed your name. Now follow the road you're on. You're finally gonna be in sci-fi. You really should be in sci-fi. You're gonna be at a con. She's going to be so happy.
With love, I want to say to our editor, Matt, if you have any auto-tune software, my friend Matthew, this is the time to bust out that software. Let that auto-tune do the work. We need to make Brad sound like Britney Spears on that one, because right now it's a little bit Nicolas Cage. That's what it sounds like.
I'm trying to think of another famous Spears that I could say. Is there another?
Because right now it sounds like a fishing spear. That's what it sounds like. Yeah, it is a dang delight to hear you sing. My favorite thing is to hear you say stars in whatever that accent is that you're doing. But yeah, I will admit that it is entirely ego of being invited as a guest of honor that I'm like, oh well, yes. I guess I will go. I'm in. You know, Count Dave Kellett in.
You get to make those tweets, Dave Kellett, guest of honor. What's the name of the con again?
LOSCON. I don't know if it's pronounced LosCon, or as though it has a T, or LosCon, because it is in Los Angeles. So it's probably
so it's Los as in Los Angeles, LOS, LosCon. Dave's going to be a guest of honor at LosCon, and it's coming up this fall, right?
This fall. So provided the next letter of the Greek alphabet doesn't make an appearance, I'll be going. And
hopefully we're not down to theta by then.
Oh my God. Oh God. I just don't want Omega. As long as we're not getting to Omega, we're good.
Yeah.
So and I will give you a full report on, because I have no idea what to expect from a science fiction convention. I have no idea. I think whatever a Comic-Con is, that, what we could expect at a Comic-Con in terms of weird interactions, for whatever reason, Brad, I think science fiction is going to be that exponentially higher. You know what I mean? As far as human interactions that strike you as odd.
We've got to figure out a way to do something live from the show floor. We've got to have a live report either for the podcast.
Brad, would you like to come to Los Angeles?
What's that?
Would you like to come to Los Angeles?
Oh, for this?
They did offer me a free hotel room, but I'm in Los Angeles, so I said, I'll save your money. Maybe I should get you a hotel room.
I could be your +1.
The good news there is I would laugh all weekend. No matter how bad the show was, I would laugh so much all weekend with you there. Oh my God.
We might have to think. Of course, it's going to be a tough sell, because we're going to turn right around in November and do the Charles Schulz Museum. You know what I'll do? I'll come in for the sci-fi
You're
con
staying for 3
and
weeks.
just
That's
stay
what you're
with
doing.
you for just be a house until you're ready to murder me.
It's
going to
be like Winston Churchill came to visit Roosevelt and he was just in the White House for 3 months. Like, you're just going to come and stay. That'll be great. Yeah.
Set up my Wacom One in the corner and do comics all week long. Oh yeah, we got to figure this out.
This will be great. I'll tell the Sci-Fi Con that I need a hotel room for my work husband, and we'll get you in there. That'll be great.
Yeah.
All right.
Perfect.
So now we've done the 2 updates for today. So now I have a question, Brad, that I want to read you, and it's a long one, but I think it might have interesting short answers. We'll see. So this comes in from Dave Lerner over at patreon.com/Comic Lab and writes, "Hello, comic mavens." So we are now mavens, Bradley. I like that.
We've
very
gone
much.
from ravens to mavens.
I saw you had that in your back pocket, USM. All right. I sometimes get comments on my comic, which is freaking amazing. The thought that somebody reads my comic, likes it, and takes the time to say something nice, that just blows me away. Amen to that. But what is the proper etiquette for responding? I know just ignore insults, and happily I get very few of those, but do I respond to all the other comments? And do I do a long, well-thought-out reply, or is thanks or a smile emoji enough? What about a comment that, while not insulting, is crude enough to make me uncomfortable, even though the commenter means well? How do I respond to a commenter who guesses an upcoming story event or says a joke I've written but has not yet posted? How do I encourage, well, there's even more. How do I encourage people to comment more? Do I encourage people to comment more? Does that get people more engaged with the comic? Or is it just more effort for no tangible reward? Thank you so much. All right, Brad, there's a lot of questions there, but it basically comes down to Dave knows not to respond to insults. Those are out.
Right.
And thank goodness we've covered that one.
Right.
But how do you respond to everything from positive to so-so to middle of the road or passingly insulting, even though they didn't mean to be insulting? Brad, what's your shorthand version for Dave on how to respond to these comments?
I believe for myself very strongly in always giving positive reinforcement to any kind of nice interaction. In other words, any kind of interaction that I want to see more of, I give positive reinforcement to that just on basic psychological principles, right? You always reinforce the behavior you want to see. So anytime I see somebody being nice, a nice little outreach, I try, I probably am not as thorough as I should be at times, but I try to always at least put a little smiley face on that, or put the thumbs up or the heart button or whatever, give some kind of response, even if it's not a worded response, something that says, hey, I saw this, thank you, right?
Right.
Now, as far as a backhanded compliment, right? A compliment that isn't quite a compliment that you're talking about.
Passive aggressive or a little bit snarky.
Crude enough to make you feel uncomfortable. Silence. You do not owe anybody anything. If they made you even a little bit uncomfortable, silence. You don't respond at all. Okay. Yeah. And of course, going all the way to mean compliments, of course, you don't even respond to that. I'm even debating, like on my Patreon, when I see stuff that's just, either mean or it takes nitpicking to a ridiculous degree, I'm even starting to just delete them. Because it's like, I don't even want to see this. I'm done with it, right?
Oh yeah, I will sometimes get one sentence into an email that I can tell is 4 paragraphs of going to be complaint, and I don't even read it. I just delete it. I'm like, to shine it.
Yeah, I don't want to bring this into my creative process. I don't want to bring this into my head. It's bad for me. Boom, it's gone. You're under no obligation. So, and by the way, it's not censorship. You're not preventing this person from saying it anyplace else. You're just saying, not in my house.
Yeah.
Right. You wouldn't let somebody come into your house and start verbally abusing your kids or your partner or yourself. You'd say, hey, that's fine. You got that verbal abuse. That's fine. Just step outside and I'm going to shut the door and turn on the music.
Well, you know what, Brad? That's actually a really good, you probably said this intentionally, but that's a really good comparison, because you wouldn't let somebody abuse your children or your spouse or your partner or your friend. Don't let them abuse you. So you don't have to read an email that you can tell is already heading towards abusiveness. Just delete it, to Brad's point. You don't owe them the benefit of having read it. Go ahead.
Right. How do I encourage people to comment more? Exactly what I just said. More positive reinforcement for stuff that you do like. Engage the people who are friendly engagers and ignore the others. They don't deserve anything from you. You're already giving them a comic. Think of it that way. And I do often. It's like, oh my gosh, I put this comic up that I spent hours on. right? I toiled on this thing. And if you've got nothing but bad things to say about it, that's your right. But I'm not going to put an additional hour into discussing it with you.
Right.
I've already put enough hours in. I put my time in. You don't get any more time unless I choose to.
Yeah. So a part of that is, you know how Victorian letter writers used to say, thank you for the thank you for the thank you? You know what I mean? It was letters back and forth about like, someone dropped off a bowl of fruit, so then they get a thank you letter. And then the other person sends a thank you letter back to thank them for the thank you letter. And you're like, all right, we're spiraling into Victorian letter writing. To Brad's point, keep in mind that you have charged them nothing, have given them a comic that you worked hours on. The message was all buried in the comic. It was all there, everything they needed. They are saying thank you for it. What I'm getting at is, to echo Brad's thought, you're under no obligation to say thank you for the thank you. But to Brad's point, it is always nice to answer a positive to a positive. And that doesn't mean you have to write anything more than a sentence of, so glad you're reading. Thanks so much. You keep reading them, I'll keep writing them. Or you made the one that I always like to use, because it's true, even in passing, is you made my day. Thank you for that. Have a great day. That kind of thing. Yep. I keep it short because remember, we're under no obligation to write back, King James Bible in terms of length. Yeah. Just a little short thank you is all. And frankly, yes to supporting and reinforcing positivity. Yes to absolutely ignoring insults. And frankly, if someone is being passive aggressive, or you feel like they are slighting you, then the answer there is they are slighting you. You do not have to respond to that. Even if it's clever, it's coy, it's delightful. It doesn't matter. If they're being a jerk to you, you don't need that in your mind space, and you don't need to give it any effort as far as a response. That can absolutely be dealt with as a straight up insult too,
Yep, absolutely. So the short form is, reinforce the stuff you want to see, ignore the stuff that you want to see disappear, and go back to being the best version of you doing your comic.
Yeah. Yep. And also that if it's taking you a lot of sort of mental cycles to try to ramp up to answer, you don't have to be one of those artists that has to answer. You can just let it go into the void, and that's okay too. But to Brad's point, it does help build an audience to reinforce with a little positivity. But if it's taking you, there's some people for whom emotionally it's harder to ramp up to write a lot of responses to a lot of different people. If that's harder for you, you don't have to do it, although it is encouraged, but you don't have to do it.
Absolutely. So, Dave, we've got another question from a Patreon backer. This comes in from Andrew Frazier, who says, hey, guys, I'm getting ready to uncork a story I've been fermenting in the bottle, which is another French comment.
Yeah, there we go.
Yes, for 17 years now. I have
17 years?
17 years this thing's been fermenting in the bottle.
Dang.
That's even longer than Orson was fermenting, I'm sure.
Yeah.
I have a suitcase full of notes to go through and a solid character Bible. What advice would you give to someone starting a big project? If Dave would go back in time to the day he started working on Drive, what would he say to himself? So, Dave, this is this is really a good one for you, because you're definitely somebody whose Drive is very well known for being a very well planned out long form story. But I'm sure there's some points that you go back and say, if I had it to do all over again, I would do this. Well, what would that be?
Brad, before I give my answer, can I play armchair psychologist for an artist here? Because in the number 17, I just heard something that I think actually is revealing, which is a trunk full of notes, full character Bible. By the way, perfectly fine to have both of those. That's as you should. You've done a lot of preparation, but also 17 years of fermentation. Yeah. That's a long time, and makes me think that the real advice that future you might give you is, for God's sakes, just start. You've been sitting on it too long.
Maybe.
I think there is a time, who knows? It could be life events, could be work events, could be kids that have stopped the project, could be coming back to art after many years away. So yes, absolutely, those 17 years, but a tiny bit of me suspects that it's hesitation, it's fear that's keeping this person from starting. And so I will now tie this into the advice that I would give past me, which is trust yourself.
Yeah.
It's because if I traveled back in time and told Dave Kellett 10 years ago, listen, you need to write a little bit more air into chapter 1, or you need to build out this character a little bit better before you really dive into the story. Who knows? Past me might write too much. If I tried to overcorrect them, in terms of going back. The thing is, you have to know that even right now, if future Dave came back and told me right now what I needed to do, the best advice that they could give me is trust myself, because if I write myself into a corner, I'm going to write myself out of a corner. If I write myself down into a blind alley and go, oh shit, why did I do this? Now I have to creatively ramp up, very quickly spin the wheels going and go, how do I write myself out of this? So honestly, trust is a great way for future you to tell past you how to get started. Trust yourself to get going. That if you're, all the same rules apply, obviously, with starting a big story. Start in medias res if you can. Get a hook at the beginning of the story, and then maybe then dive back into backstory if you have to. All the classic rules apply, but trust is such a major part about starting. Trust yourself to just dive in. You've done 17 years of thinking and planning. Now is the time to start. Brad, what are your thoughts?
Well, I've got to be honest with you. When I saw this question come through the pike, I had a different idea and I had a different answer.
That's totally fine. By the way,
How would I go back and talk to Brad Geiger when I relaunched Evil Inc. in 2012 as a long form story? What would I go back and tell that guy? And at the risk of contradicting you or coming at it from 180 degrees, I would have said, I want you to spend more time planning. I really would. And I don't, and it's not that I don't, and we're gonna be useless for poor Andrew, but
we've just given him another 3 years of stasis. All right.
So here's the deal. Every time this happens to me often, and it's frustrating when I come to a point in the storyline and I go, oh my gosh, it would have been so nice if I would have set this up
if I had
2 storylines ago, right? And I put somebody in there and I said, and this is a dumb example, but just to get this conversation going, if somebody said, well, I'm a vegan, and then 2 storylines later, you have them at a steakhouse, right? And they're faced with that, oh no, I'm a vegan. Or whatever it is. In other words, there's so many times that that good writing means connecting ideas over time and making relationships happen that way and making plot points happen that way. Right. Not necessarily, it's not all like Easter egg stuff. Like this guy that was in the background in chapter 1 is now a big bad in chapter 5. Although that's cool stuff too.
That's fine, yeah.
But there's so many times in my own writing when I realize, I missed an opportunity there, or it would have been so much better if I would have done this. I would have planned this out more, if I would have written more and then gone back and edited and planned it out. I often grieve those missed opportunities. But when that happens, what Dave said comes into play, where I say, okay, maybe you've completely screwed this storyline up. Now your job as a writer is to unscrew it, to find the most creative way to straighten that out and unscrew it. And by the way, up to and including the idea of going back to that old comic and redrawing a panel or putting something back in there. I even hold that out on the table right up until the time the book is printed. Then you can't make changes. But as long as that stuff is pixels and not ink, I even retain the right. I don't think I've ever done it, but I hold it out as a right that I would go back and change something like that. If it was a big enough reason. I wouldn't do it too often, because then again, you're starting to chase your tail there. It's got to be a good reason to make you do it.
Right.
But the important point there is that, yes, sometimes you're going to find, shucks, I really should have set something up better there. I should have done this. I should have done that. You're going to have, as a writer, 101 should have dones, could have dones, and would have dones.
Right.
What Dave is saying, though, it should be your overriding thought. No matter how much whether you fall into my camp of do a little bit more writing before you start, or whether you fall into Dave's camp, which is, listen, you've fermented long enough, just get going already. No matter which one of those you drop into, the important thing is, remember what Dave said, overall, trust yourself as a writer. There's no problem that you can create for yourself that you can't solve for yourself.
Right. So Brad, right now I'm in the process of, Drive so far, we've done 3 acts and it's taken about 10 years and it's probably going to take me another, 5 to 8 years to finish the story, right?
Yeah.
Now, in an ideal world, what would happen is at the end of that story, there would be an editor. They would say like, look, if you just change this phrase in act 1, or if you moved this starship over here, if you brought these characters forward, there's changes that would make the cohesive story work better. But that's not the way I'm telling the story. It's going to literally take me almost 2 decades to tell the story. There's no way I could have had an editor fix it. So what I have to do is not only trust myself, I have to like myself in this way. I have to say I did the best that I could with the information that I had at the time, right? And that means that later on, if I have to go back and George Lucas a starship so that it looks better in my current style than it did when I drew it 8 years ago, that's okay. I drew it the best I could 8 years ago with the information and the skills that my hands had at the time, right? And if I, in reprinting the book, wanted George Lucas a starship to make it look better or change a tiny bit of dialogue so that it ties in better with Act 3, that's on me and that's okay. I can do that. But what I'm saying is I don't beat myself up for the mistakes that I might have made because they're not mistakes. I did the best I could as a storyteller at the time. And at a future date, I might, sort of retcon it. That's okay. But in general, you have to like and trust yourself and go forward with the best footing you can because you're doing the best you can at each step of the process is what I'm getting at.
Yeah. Oh, man. Like yourself. That's a tough one for a lot of us.
Oh, myself included. Yeah, it's very tough.
It really is important, is to like yourself well enough to say, hey, it is what it is, and now you're just going to have to do the best. And that's okay. That's not a bad thing. It's okay too,
Yeah. And follow your heart in the sense of like in this with starting the story, I can sense the hesitancy after 17 years of you just don't want to mess it up. You've done so much planning. You don't want to mess up the beginning. The thing is, find the angle, the spark that brings you the greatest joy, and you kind of can't go wrong. Jump into the story at that point, and you can't go wrong. Yeah. If you're following your bliss by trusting and liking yourself and following where the excitement is, I honest to God think your story will do great.
Well, and last time I was in Los Angeles, you actually had embroidered on a pillow a Susan McTaggart quote about following your heart. Do you remember what that said?
Oh, you jerk. Yeah. Susan McTaggart had that famous quote, and it said, friends, follow your heart because the only thing that can follow is your heart. That was terrible. Hold on. I'm going to get another running start at one. I've never bailed out of one before. Hold on.
It was, don't you remember? It was embroidered right there on your pillow.
It was embroidered.
You had it over on the couch.
Brad, it was on my couch and it said, the heart wants what it wants, and what it wants you to do is follow it, friends. Follow your heart. That's right. Susan McTaggart, look for my new book, A Brighter You in 20 Days, coming out from Random Horse Publishing. Oh, you're going to love it.
Oh, that's beautiful.
I worked in Random Horse. That's what I did.
Yeah, I saw you do that.
So anyway, best of luck with this story after 17 years. I think between Brad and I, hopefully you'll be able to find a spark that works for you in your process of writing. And good luck with it. We do wish you genuine good luck with it.
Well, I can give you a clue on how to have a brighter you in 7 days. You can come back and hear the next episode of Comic Lab Podcast, the show about making comics and making a living from comics.
Your hosts have been my friend Brad Geiger, the editor of webcomics.com and the creator of Evil Inc. at evil-comic.com.
And my good friend Dave Kellett, the co-director of the comics documentary Stripped and the cartoonist of Sheldon at SheldonComics.com and Drive at DriveComic.com.
And we give a shout out to our sponsors for this week, Wacom and the makers of the Wacom One at WACOM.com. And the Comic Lab theme song is used with permission from Andy Creighton at theworldrecord.net. And this episode was edited by Matt Woodard of Woodsong Productions over at www.woodsong.media.
If you love Comic Lab, you can rate and review the show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and more, and you might even hear your review featured on a future episode.
And Comic Lab is made possible by your support at patreon.com/Comic Lab. So we'll go ahead and say that like Ronald Reagan. Well, patreon.com/Comic Lab. Oh, Nancy. Oh, Nancy. Oh, it got weird there at the end there. Hey, Ronald, maybe don't make it so weird there at the end there.
Well, I think that one butcher is mad. He's giving me the middle finger. Or,
it's all he has left.
3/4 of one. And now it's time for your weekly affirmation with Susan McTaggart.
Hello, friends. Susan McTaggart here with your weekly affirmation. And today's affirmation goes out for everyone who's a little bit struggling with the moment. I say to you, I want you to say in your heart, I am at peace with all that has happened, with all that is happening, and all that will happen. And I don't want you to think about what's currently happening with my ex-husband, Gerald, and his assistant down in Boca Raton. I don't care what's happening. I'm at peace. I'm at peace, friends. Look for my new book, Susan McTaggart, 48 Ways for the Better You Today and Tomorrow, coming soon from Penguin Publishing.
If you love someone, set them free. Gerald, I'd like to set you free out of an airplane over the Grand Canyon.